Deep in the murky radioactive waters of Chernobyl's cooling pond lurk some of the most chilling creatures you could imagine: giant catfish. These behemoths, some stretching up to 10 feet long and weighing over 200 pounds, have become infamous among visitors who toss food into the water just to catch a glimpse. The sight is haunting: massive, pale bodies slowly emerging, their whiskered faces giving them an almost ancient, otherworldly presence. Scientists believe their size isn't solely due to radiation but a mix of factors: no predators, plenty of food, and an environment where these fish can live for decades, growing continuously. Still, locals whisper eerie tales of glowing eyes and translucent skin, fueling theories that radiation has twisted their genes in ways science can't fully explain. Some even say these scavengers will devour anything unlucky enough to fall into the pond. Standing by the still water, it's hard not to feel uneasy. You toss a piece of bread and watch as ripples form, then a pale shadow glides up, silent and enormous, before vanishing back into the depths. It's a stark reminder that in Chernobyl, even the water hides its monsters. In the shadowy wetlands of the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, life has found unsettling ways to adapt, and nowhere is this more apparent than in the amphibians. Frogs and salamanders, once ordinary creatures of these swamps, now display horrifying mutations that feel like they've crawled straight out of a horror film. Chief among these deformities are two-headed specimens, a grotesque reality that defies nature and stokes fears about the long-term effects of radiation on life. Scientists who study these amphibians have documented a wide array of abnormalities: extra limbs, misshapen eyes, and twisted spines. But it's the two-headed mutations that are most chilling. These poor creatures often struggle to survive as their dual heads compete for control of their shared body. Some observers say it's like watching a creature caught in an endless internal battle, a tragic symbol of how radiation warps life at its most basic levels. While the mutation rate among amphibians is significantly higher in the exclusion zone, the exact cause of these deformities remains a topic of debate. Some argue it's directly linked to the high radiation levels, while others suggest environmental stressors, like contaminated water and habitat destruction, play a role. Regardless, the eerie sight of a two-headed frog hopping awkwardly through the radioactive marshes is impossible to forget. Beneath the scorched soil of Chernobyl's exclusion zone, a bizarre and eerie phenomenon unfolds. Earthworms, once the most unassuming of creatures, have developed traits that feel almost otherworldly. These radiant earthworms are said to emit a faint glow in the dark, an unsettling bioluminescence that's become a chilling symbol of how life adapts to extreme environments. Scientists believe this glow is tied to the worm's exposure to radioactive particles embedded in the soil. While the bioluminescence isn't visible to the naked eye in most cases, studies show these worms absorb radiation and may produce faint light as a response to cellular stress. This adaptation, though fascinating, has made these creatures crucial for researchers studying how life can survive, and even thrive, in radioactive environments. But there's more to these worms than their eerie glow. Reports suggest they've grown larger and more robust than their non-radioactive counterparts. They dig deeper into the soil, moving radioactive materials and reshaping the very earth beneath them. It's as if they've become engineers of the zone, spreading contamination but also managing to flourish in a place that should be uninhabitable. This chilling image surfaced from a surveillance camera deep within the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Security personnel monitoring the area were left in shock as this hunched skeletal figure with glowing eyes crept into view before vanishing into the darkness. Scientists have no explanation. Some believe it's a grotesque mutation, a byproduct of radiation gone rogue. Others whisper darker theories, something ancient awakened by the disaster lurking in the ruins. No tracks were found, no body, just this one horrifying glimpse into the unknown. In a remote farm on the edge of the exclusion zone, a creature was born that defies explanation. This two-headed goat, with its distorted faces and vacant, clouded eyes, became an unsettling symbol of radiation's lingering grip. Farmers reported its erratic movements, one head trying to lead while the other lagged behind, its double set of jaws chewing in eerie synchronization. Scientists were baffled. Was this an extreme case of polycephaly, or had radiation truly rewritten nature's rules? The goat survived longer than expected, but its existence raised a terrifying question. How many more like it are hidden in the zone? Step too close to the stagnant, radioactive swamps of Chernobyl, and you might find yourself in a nightmare you can't escape. The leeches here are nothing like their ordinary inch-long relatives. These monsters can grow over a foot long, their bloated bodies writhing just beneath the water's surface, waiting. Scientists have noted an alarming resilience in these creatures. Radiation should have wiped them out, yet they thrive, seemingly immune to contamination. Their feeding habits are even more disturbing. Normally, leeches target small amphibians, but in the exclusion zone, they latch onto anything warm-blooded, sometimes in swarms. Reports from researchers tell of boots covered in squirming, engorged parasites, their translucent skin revealing the dark, thick blood of their latest victim. The real horror? They don't just feed and drop off. Some continue sucking for hours, undisturbed by movement or even attempts to remove them. It's as if the radiation made them hungrier, stronger, and far more aggressive than they ever should be. But the leeches aren't the only survivors. On land, another species has defied the disaster: mice and rats, the exclusion zone's true rulers. Scientists studying these rodents have found shocking genetic adaptations. Unlike their urban cousins, these rats don't just endure radiation, their bodies seem to repair the cellular damage it causes. Tests have shown that their DNA exhibits fewer mutations than expected, as if they've evolved to shrug off radiation's deadly effects. What's more unsettling is their sheer number. Decades without human interference have allowed these rodents to spread unchecked, burrowing into abandoned buildings, darting through shattered streets, thriving in places where most life struggles. Traps set by researchers often reveal specimens with enlarged teeth, thicker fur, and even altered eye structure, small mutations that over generations have made them something entirely new. There's even speculation that these creatures could become an entirely different species, one born from the wasteland. But if rodents have adapted to Chernobyl's radiation, what about its predators? Deep in the red forest, where radiation levels spiked so high that trees turned crimson and died within days, a different kind of survivor slithers through the undergrowth. The snakes here are wrong. While many reptiles around Chernobyl have grown darker due to increased melanin and apparent defense against radiation, some specimens exhibit far stranger mutations. Reports describe snakes with elongated, almost unnatural bodies, 2 heads, extra scales forming jagged ridges down their spines, and in rare cases, additional eyes. These reptiles move differently too, faster, twitchier, as if something in their nervous system has been rewired. Scientists tracking their movement have found them hunting in patterns that seem almost erratic, striking at shadows, reacting to things unseen. Some locals believe these mutations make the snakes more aggressive, even unpredictable. The idea of an already silent, stealthy predator becoming even more dangerous is unsettling, and yet in the ruins of Chernobyl, where nature no longer follows the rules, nothing should come as a surprise. The air above Chernobyl isn't empty, it belongs to the bats. Unlike most creatures, these winged survivors seem to have flourished in the radioactive wasteland. Colonies hidden deep within abandoned buildings have grown to staggering numbers, with bats roosting in places once occupied by humans. Scientists tracking them have noticed strange anomalies. Some bats are larger than usual, with elongated wings that make their movements unnervingly silent. Others have displayed unusual vocalizations, clicks and screeches at frequencies higher than normal, almost like they're sensing something beyond human perception. Even their feeding habits have changed. Researchers report that Chernobyl's bats are more aggressive hunters, targeting insects in rapid, frenzied bursts. Some speculate that radiation has altered their metabolism, forcing them to consume more food to survive. But the most unsettling reports come from those brave enough to enter the abandoned buildings at dusk. When disturbed, entire colonies erupt in a chaotic swarm, filling the air with an unnatural, deafening screech. Some say it feels less like fleeing, and more like a warning. But bats aren't the only creatures haunting the skies over the exclusion zone. Among the ruins, an even more sinister legend has emerged: the blackbird of Chernobyl. Described as a massive, shadowy figure with piercing red eyes, it was supposedly seen in the days leading up to the nuclear disaster. Workers at the power plant reported eerie sightings, claiming they felt watched, followed by nightmares and unexplained phone calls filled with static. Then, after the explosion, the sightings stopped, until recently. New eyewitness accounts from researchers claim to have spotted a dark, winged figure perched atop crumbling buildings, vanishing the moment it's approached. Whether it's just a persistent urban legend or something more tangible, the blackbird has become a terrifying symbol of the exclusion zone. Scientists dismiss it as hysteria, but those who have seen it firsthand tell a different story. If this creature is real, what is it? A massive mutated bird, a species undiscovered, or something else entirely, something that only appears before disaster strikes? Legends aside, some mutated birds in Chernobyl are very real, and far more disturbing. Among the most unsettling are the ravens. Normally intelligent and resourceful, the ravens of the Exclusion Zone have developed eerie, blood-red eyes and unusually aggressive tendencies. Scientists believe the radiation may have caused genetic shifts in their melanin production, resulting in their haunting appearance. But it's not just their looks that make them terrifying, it's their behavior. Unlike other ravens, these scavengers don't just pick at remains, they stalk. Researchers observing them have reported being followed for miles, the birds circling overhead, watching, waiting. Some have even described instances where flocks of these ravens have driven larger animals away from food, an unusual level of coordination. The idea of a bird adapting to radiation in such a way is unnerving. What if these creatures are evolving into something even smarter, even more capable? If they've already changed so much, how much further can they go? Beneath the poisoned soil of Chernobyl, an unsettling secret writhes, flesh-eating worms. Unlike ordinary earthworms, these mutated creatures have developed an insatiable appetite for decaying flesh. Researchers have discovered that their populations thrive in areas of high radiation, feeding not just on organic debris but also on the remains of small animals that succumb to the zone's toxic embrace. Studies suggest that these worms have adapted to the radioactive environment by becoming more resilient and aggressive, burrowing deeper and moving faster than their non-mutated counterparts. What makes them even more horrifying is their role in the ecosystem. They accelerate decomposition, turning contaminated flesh into a nutrient-rich medium that further spreads radiation. Encountering a mass of these worms, squirming in a feeding frenzy, is enough to unsettle even the most seasoned scientist. It's as if the ground itself is alive, consuming whatever touches it. And just as these worms have adapted to thrive, so too have other larger creatures, like the dogs that roam the ghost town of Pripyat. Roaming through the abandoned streets and crumbling buildings of Pripyat, the feral dogs of Chernobyl are a heartbreaking and eerie sight. Descendants of pets left behind during the hasty evacuation, these dogs have adapted to a life in the shadow of radiation. Without human caretakers, they formed packs, relying on their instincts to survive. What makes them unsettling beyond their gaunt frames and wary eyes is their behavior. Unlike typical feral dogs, those in Chernobyl exhibit heightened aggression and unusual hunting tactics. Some have learned to open doors or scavenge through buildings, adaptations born of necessity in this harsh environment. Researchers have noted that these dogs show increased rates of tumors and other physical abnormalities, likely due to prolonged exposure to radiation, yet they persist, haunting the empty city with their distant howls echoing through deserted structures. The survival of these dogs in such dire circumstances is both a testament to their resilience and a reminder of how profoundly Chernobyl has warped nature. As the dogs continue to carve out their existence, they share their territory with another unyielding survivor, the plague rats of Pripyat. In the dark corners and collapsed basements of Pripyat, another resilient creature thrives, the plague rats. Far from ordinary rodents, these rats have adapted disturbingly well to the radioactive ruins. Scientists studying them have discovered genetic changes that allow these creatures to tolerate higher radiation levels than normal, enabling them to reproduce rapidly and without the usual mutations that would kill other animals. Their resilience has given rise to a population explosion, and these rats have become emboldened, exploring areas even researchers avoid. Observations reveal that these rats exhibit larger teeth and more aggressive behavior, frequently scavenging in broad daylight and even challenging other animals for food. The real horror, though, is their potential role as carriers of disease. With limited human presence to control their numbers, these rats have the run of Pripyat, dragging contamination wherever they go. It's a grim thought, one that makes you wonder what other horrors these resilient creatures might be harboring. Yet, even as they infest the empty buildings and streets, the air itself buzzes with a different kind of terror, one with wings and a sting. Buzzing fills the air near the overgrown ruins of Pripyat, but it's not the sound of ordinary insects. Chernobyl's bees have changed, and not for the better. Studies on insect populations in the Exclusion Zone have revealed a disturbing pattern. These bees are not only more aggressive but also more resilient than their normal counterparts. Exposure to radiation has altered their reproductive cycles, leading to larger colonies with increased survival rates. But what really unsettles researchers is their behavior. Normally bees work in harmony, but here, they act erratically, attacking in swarms at the slightest provocation, sometimes even stinging until they die. Their venom has also changed, showing higher concentrations of toxins, though scientists are unsure why. Some theorize radiation has disrupted their nervous systems, making them hyper-defensive. Others speculate that genetic mutations are at play, pushing these creatures to evolve into something far more hostile. The idea of radiation amplifying nature's deadliest instincts is already unnerving, but what's worse is that these bees aren't alone. The soil beneath the exclusion zone is home to even stranger horrors, creatures that skitter through the undergrowth with far too many legs. If the exclusion zone is a breeding ground for unnatural evolution, then the centipedes and millipedes of Chernobyl might be some of its most grotesque creations. Normally, these creatures are small, unassuming scavengers, thriving in damp, dark places. But here, some specimens have been found growing larger than usual, their segmented bodies stretching unnervingly long. Some researchers have even documented centipedes with extra legs, more than their species should have, giving them a writhing, unnatural movement. These creatures are more than just unsettling to look at, their venom appears to have changed as well. Some millipedes, which normally produce a mild defensive toxin, now excrete stronger chemicals, possibly due to radiation exposure. But the most disturbing reports come from deep within the zone. Claims of oversized centipedes that move in packs, unlike their usual solitary nature. It's as if something in the exclusion zone has forced these creatures to adapt in ways that defy logic. And if insects and arachnids are growing larger, more venomous and more aggressive, what does that mean for other winged predators lurking in the skies? A creature like a moth, what about more aggressive insects, ones built to feed, swarm, and spread? Step into the wrong part of the exclusion zone and the buzzing finds you before you even see them. Chernobyl's mosquitoes have always been relentless, but now, they are something worse. Larger, more resilient, and far more aggressive, these mutated insects are no longer just a nuisance, they are a biological horror. Scientists studying them have found that some have grown up to 3 times their normal size, with elongated mouthparts capable of piercing through thicker layers of skin. Worse, their feeding behavior has changed. Unlike regular mosquitoes, which drink just enough blood to sustain themselves, these swarms drain their hosts relentlessly, sometimes attacking in groups that seem almost coordinated. What's even more disturbing is their resistance. Traditional repellents are far less effective in the exclusion zone, and radiation appears to have hardened them against environmental stress. Some researchers believe that, just like the Chernobyl rats, these insects are evolving beyond what we recognize, their DNA repairing itself against radiation damage. But the worst part? Mosquitoes are nature's perfect disease carriers. If they've adapted to the zone's extreme conditions, what else might they be spreading? And if insects can become this unrelenting, what happens when larger, more powerful creatures begin to mutate? Deep within the forests surrounding Chernobyl, something stirs among the underbrush. Large, heavy-bodied creatures that move with surprising speed for their size. The wild boars of the exclusion zone are unlike any others, not because of grotesque physical mutations, but because of what they carry within them. Studies have shown that these animals are some of the most radioactive in the zone, with levels of cesium-137 in their bodies so high that their meat is considered unsafe for human consumption, even decades after the disaster. The contamination isn't just superficial, it runs through their bones, their muscles, their very blood. What makes this worse is their behavior. Normally, wild boars are skittish, avoiding humans when possible, but in Chernobyl they've become far bolder. Some charge at intruders without provocation, others scavenge closer to abandoned buildings, as if drawn to something unseen. Their numbers have also exploded in recent years, with fewer predators to keep them in check. This growing population, highly mobile and spreading radioactive contamination wherever they go, poses an eerie question. If these animals can survive and even thrive in this toxic wasteland, how much further will the effects of Chernobyl's radiation reach? And if the boars are carrying the contamination in their very bodies, what about the larger creatures that call this place home? Among the trees, another haunting figure moves, one far more ghostly. Red deer, once a common sight in the forests of Ukraine, have also made a strong return to the exclusion zone. But in the darkest corners of these woods, some have changed. Reports from researchers and wildlife photographers describe deer with strange, almost phosphorescent antlers. The eerie glow isn't a product of folklore. Some scientists believe it's due to bioluminescent fungi or lichen that have taken hold on their antlers, thriving in the uniquely toxic environment. Others suggest the radiation itself has altered the mineral composition of the antlers, making them appear almost otherworldly in the right lighting. These glowing stags have become legends among those who study Chernobyl's wildlife. Their presence is haunting, especially at night, when their spectral outlines emerge from the mist, their eerie glow cutting through the darkness like something out of a nightmare. Some claim these creatures are stronger, faster, and more resistant to disease, adapting to the exclusion zone in ways scientists can't yet explain. But whatever the reason behind their strange glow, one thing is certain: nature is finding ways to survive in Chernobyl, but it's doing so in ways that defy logic. And if these large mammals are already displaying such bizarre adaptations, what horrors might be lurking among the smallest creatures in the zone? Beneath the dense overgrowth, among the cracked concrete and rusting ruins, the smallest creatures of Chernobyl have undergone some of the strangest transformations. Insects, often overlooked in larger-scale radiation studies, have displayed mutations that are both unsettling and perplexing. Some butterflies in the zone exhibit malformed wings, their symmetry broken as if nature itself is unraveling. Others have lost their color entirely, turning pale or even translucent. Spiders, which normally spin precise geometric webs, create tangled, chaotic structures, warped patterns that defy their natural instincts. Scientists speculate that radiation exposure is interfering with their nervous systems, making their once refined behaviors unpredictable and distorted. Even more disturbing are the grasshoppers and beetles, some of which appear to be growing larger, while others have developed irregular limb structures, extra antennae, or deformed eyes. Mutations in insects occur rapidly due to their short lifespans and fast reproduction cycles, meaning changes that would take generations in larger animals appear almost in real time here. What's even more eerie is the silence. Many researchers have reported that parts of the exclusion zone lack the usual buzzing of insect life, as if certain species have vanished entirely. Whether this is due to extinction or simply changes in their biological communication remains unknown. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery is that some of these insects seem strangely resistant to the contamination that warps them. Unlike mammals, which suffer radiation poisoning, certain arthropods have adapted, their mutations stabilizing over time. That's about it. Write in the comments which creature scared you the most. For more useful information, watch other videos.